Today we will review the conditional lien waiver and release on interim payment affidavit subrecipient's contractor, which is one of the Texas General Land Office supplemental documents for acquisition programs. A hyperlink to the conditional lien waiver and release on interim payment affidavit subrecipient's contractor's form can be found on the Texas General Land Office website at recovery.texas.gov. To locate the document, go to the Buyout and Acquisition Program page, which is linked below in the description section of this video. To locate the Buyout and Acquisition Program page, go to recovery.texas.gov. Click on Grant Administration at the top of the page. Click on the arrow next to Grant Implementation in the navigation menu on the left of the page. Select Buyouts and Acquisitions. Scroll down to the Acquisition for Redevelopment section and click on the Lien Waiver Affidavit Interim Subcontractor link. Once you click on the link, your computer will download the fillable document. Please note you will need Microsoft Word to view and edit the document. Acquisition for Redevelopment Program End Use Requirements. Properties purchased under an Acquisition for Redevelopment program are eligible for redevelopment in the future in a resilient manner to protect future occupants of the property. The acquired property must continue to meet one of the CDBG program's national objective and eligibility activities for at least 5 years. The post-purchase disposition of most acquired properties is subject to certain limitations and requirements and CDBG DR eligible activities and national objectives. But subrecipients have flexibility within these parameters to redevelop the properties in a way that best serves the goals of the community and in a manner that is in line with the community's long-term recovery plan. Subrecipients should have clear understanding and intended use for properties prior to implementing the program, and the eligible final uses of the acquired properties must be outlined in the subrecipient's program guidelines. Using CDBG DR funding for acquisition alone without achieving a final eligible disposition of the acquired property is not eligible. Therefore, it is critical for subrecipients to plan and ensure the funding and resources are in place to be able to achieve final disposition within the required program timelines and deadlines. It is recommended for subrecipients to have all funding sources, project partners, and plans for final disposition in place prior to launching the program and going to closing on an eligible property. Within the program guidelines, subrecipients should tie the final use of the acquired properties to their long-term community development or recovery plans, should outline the timelines for achieving final disposition, and should demonstrate why it is necessary and reasonable to redevelop in at-risk areas. Subrecipients' guidelines must identify whether the properties will be sold at fair market value or be redeveloped into affordable rental housing, public facilities, public services facilities, commercial development, or meet other CDBG DR eligible activities and national objectives. Redevelopment requirements. All properties redeveloped as part of the CDBG DR Acquisition for Redevelopment program are subject to the following requirements: compliance with all applicable CDBG DR and cross-cutting federal requirements, record a deed restriction or covenant requiring flood insurance to be maintained in perpetuity on all properties that are located in the special flood hazard area, place an affordability covenant on the deed. New construction of single-family homes from 1 to 4 units must have a minimum of 5 years affordability covenant. Properties of 5 or more units must have a 20-year affordability covenant. Elevation standards, green building standards, housing quality standards, local code requirements, broadband infrastructure and multifamily housing, resilient home building standards, and accessibility or visitability requirements. Subrecipients are required to ensure that the end use and final disposition meets all of the requirements and to monitor the properties for compliance and eligibility with all federal and program final uses, to include, but not limited to, the long-term monitoring of meeting a national objective, for example, affordable housing term and job creation requirements, and construction standards. Acquisition for redevelopment programs must meet these disposition requirements and end-use requirements during the period of performance on the grant contract. The lien waiver release is a tool to help protect the subrecipient and ensure the redevelopment will meet the end-use and final disposition requirements. By completing the lien waiver, the subrecipient ensures that by paying the contractor for the work completed to date, the contractor will pay all laborers and subcontractors and will release liens on the property. Outstanding liens or rights to the property may be time-consuming to resolve and could potentially inhibit the subrecipient's ability to rent out or sell the property, therefore complicating the ability to meet the end-use requirement in time. The lien waiver for interim payments is only required for acquisition for redevelopment programs that are using CDBG funding to pay for the redevelopment of the parcel. However, the form is encouraged to be used for all acquisition for redevelopment programs that are paying contractors for reconstruction, regardless of the funding source for the redevelopment. This form is specific to interim payments. It is for situations where the subrecipient will not be paying the contractor one lump sum when completed, but rather paying at interims based on work completed as described in the contract with the contractor. For this video, we will use an example of a fictional subrecipient and contractor to explain the form. To begin, subrecipients should complete the top section of the form with information on the project and property to be redeveloped. For subrecipient, subrecipients should input their name. For contract, subrecipients should input their contract number. In the applicant name and address cell, subrecipients can input the address of the property that will be redeveloped. Note, you do not need to input anything for applicant name, as there are no applicants tied to redevelopment of properties for this program. For project number, subrecipients should input their project number in Tiger for the related property. For example, previously, Rango County created a project in Tiger for 123 Dolce Lane for eligibility review. The Tiger number associated with that property should be input here. Then input the project legal description of the property to be redeveloped. The property's legal description is a description of real property by a government survey, a meets and bounds survey, or by lot numbers of a recorded plat. The description allows a parcel of land to be located and identified based on what is written. The legal description is kept with the deed and filed with the county clerk or county tax assessor. The legal description can be found on the tax assessor's website or the title commitment. Finally, input the project type depending on the type of construction. In this case, the subrecipient is reconstructing the house with resilient standards, so it is a reconstruction. In the second section, the subrecipient or contractor will input the name of the contractor and address. Next, input the phone number of the contractor. Then the subrecipient should input the amount that the contractor is requesting in their invoice, which has been agreed to be paid by the subrecipient. The third section provides the conditions of the document and the payment. It states, on receipt by the signer of this document, payment from the subrecipient in the requested amount listed above, payable to the aforementioned subrecipient's contractor, will be paid. Subsequently, when the payment has been paid by the bank on which it is drawn, this document becomes effective to release any mechanic's lien right and any right arising from a payment bond that complies with a state or federal statute, any common law payment bond right, any claim for payment, and any rights under any similar ordinance, rule, or statute related to claim or payment rights for persons in the signer's position that the signer has on the project's legal description to fulfill the scope of the project. In other words, once this document is signed and notarized, the subrecipient will pay the contractor the agreed upon amount due, and as a result, the contractor will release any liens that are on the property for that amount. Using our example, Bob's Builders will sign and execute the document with a notary. Then Rango County will pay the contractor $140,000. Subsequently, Bob's Builders will release $140,000 of the lien or claim for rights. Next, the form states this release covers the interim payment to the signer for all labor, services, equipment, or materials furnished to the property or to the subrecipient as indicated in the attached statements or interim payment requests, except for unpaid retention, pending modifications and changes, or other items furnished. This statement clarifies that the release is for an interim payment, not a final payment, and covers the construction of the property for this interim based on the payment request. Then the form states, before any recipient of this document relies on this document, the recipient should verify evidence of payment to the signer. The signer warrants that the signer has already paid or will use the funds received from this interim payment to promptly pay in full all of the signer's laborers, subcontractors, material men, and suppliers for all work, materials, equipment, or services provided for or to the above referenced project in regard to the attached statements or interim payment requests. This restates that the subrecipient must pay the contractor in addition to the execution of the form for the document to be valid. In addition, the contractor then is required to have paid or to immediately pay any contractors or suppliers due payment as a result of work on this project. Next, the form states subrecipient's contractor hereby indemnifies the General Land Office, GLO, its officers, employees, designees, and the state of Texas from and against any loss or expense resulting from false or incorrect information within this affidavit. Therefore, the GLO and the state of Texas is protected from any repercussions as a result of loss or expense resulting from false or incorrect information with this form. In addition, the subrecipient's contractor further understands that this affidavit is being given pursuant to and in accordance with Sections 53.085 and 53.259 of the Texas Property Code, and that the intentional, knowing, or reckless making of a false or misleading statement in this affidavit constitutes an offense under said section and is a Class A misdemeanor. The undersigned acknowledges that a failure to accurately certify full and final payment of all bills associated with this contract document will result in exclusion from participation in future contracts that utilize CDBG DR funds. This certifies that the information presented in the form must not be false or misleading, and failure to provide correct information and failure to make all payments related to this contract may be considered a misdemeanor and will result in exclusion from future CDBG DR contracts. Finally, The form certifies that prior to payment, the contractor eligibility form will need to be submitted to the GLO along with Form SF-424D, Assurances Construction Programs, and a complete insurance binder for the subrecipient's contractor. The subrecipient is responsible for ensuring the subrecipient's contractor remains insured through the project and/or until their work is complete and satisfactorily agreed upon. This statement is for subrecipients using CDBG DR funding to construct the redevelopment. The contractor eligibility form, along with the SF-424D and complete insurance binder, must be submitted to the GLO prior to reimbursement of CDBG DR funds for construction. For acquisition for redevelopment projects that are using CDBG DR funds for the acquisition of the project, but a different funding source for the redevelopment, subrecipients are still required to gather that documentation from the contractor and maintain at a local file. These documents will be required to be submitted prior to closeout as part of the right side file packet and for any monitoring visits. The final section is for the contractor to sign and certify the document in front of a notary. First, the contractor will print their company name. Then the authorized representative of the company will input their name. Then they will input their title. Then they will sign and date in front of the notary, certifying the information presented in the documentation and compliance with the requirements within. Finally, the notary will input the name of the authorized representative that was signing. And the notary will print their name and signature, input the date the notary's commission expires, and will stamp their seal on the affidavit. We hope you enjoyed this training on the conditional lien waiver and release on interim payment affidavit subrecipient's contractor. If there are any additional questions during the completion of the form, subrecipients should reach out to their General Land Office grant manager. Additional videos covering the other required local buyout and acquisition forms are or will soon be available at the same location you are viewing this one.